The first time I got pregnant, I went to my friend, she's an acupuncturist, and she does the needling. She leaves the room and she says, just relax. I don't know what happened, but my mind literally went to almost seeing my inner organs, like seeing the egg. Whoa. Seeing myself ovulate. It was very strange. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh my God.
About 18 months later, we try another IVF cycle because we're trying to get pregnant again. The IVF cycle didn't even work at all. But at that point, I wasn't doing acupuncture anymore.
Yeah.
So I go to her and I'm like, I don't know what to do. She says, come to me. She does her needling. In October, my cycle goes 24 days, 25, 26. I'm at 32 days. I call her and I say, listen, you either threw me into menopause or I'm pregnant. I was pregnant. This is so weird. Explain that.
Yeah.
Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I'm your host, Dr. Nee, joined by the habitual line stepper, also known as my wife, also known as the best OB doc out there. I'm talking about Dr. Don't take up all the hot air. It is hot as hell in this basement.
Oh, my God.
Y'all, it is hot. This is true New York City. We in Jersey, though. This is true New York City summer, 1996, 95, 94 summer. When you go and you open up the fire hydrants.
It's not even summer yet, though.
But it's hot. And we recording in the basement, and we're going to make this work. And it's a vibe. It's a vibe, yo. So if you know what I'm talking about, there's no air conditioner down here. We just got this dehumidifier that's actually making it hotter and stuff. But that's just the way how it is, y'all. And we just so excited to have y'all here. But listen, let's jump right into this, y'all. What are we talking about today? Come on, let's get into this.
We're talking about starting not just your career. So for those of you who are not watching, Nee is showing his Father's Day gift.
Even though we're about to talk about a woman's topic.
No, that's not a woman's topic, actually. It's not a woman's topic.
Shout out to my son, my oldest son. He did a project called My Super Dad. And it's basically a coloring book, or he created a coloring thing of how, like, I'm the most amazing dad out there, because I am. And for all you dads out there who are like, yo, I am, like, no, you're not. I'm the best dad out there.
You have this super dad workbook.
For example, like, here's a picture right here that says, right here, right? You see how amazing he is? It says, my dad watches Lila in the Loop on television. When he listens to music, it's always Eddie Murphy, right? Like, how many of y'all kids know you that much that they know who you listen to? Because Eddie Murphy was, like, the best artist for a while.
Okay.
He was the king of hip hop in 1986.
Put a tree in your butt, put a bubble bee in your butt, put a clock in your butt, put a big rock in your butt.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yo, let's jump into this topic, yo.
Anyway, let's talk about this topic for real.
Yo, Dr. Nee's on one.
Yeah, you are on one. You need to get off one. But no, we're talking about...
and you can't be tapping the table because you tapping the camera.
Okay,
come on
that's
now.
Fine.
Podcast etiquette.
We are talking about starting your family and starting your career, and when the two potentially conflict, right? I think this is not a woman's topic in particular, right? Because women and men, couples, can experience infertility. You and I went through our own infertility process.
I hate when you say that.
What?
This is a woman's.
This is not a woman's topic. What, men can't be infertile?
The people who make the final decision is ultimately going to be you, though, right?
No. What does that mean? What does that mean, Nee?
Okay, we potting. Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
No, we are potting. So you telling me, so men can't be infertile?
Oh, okay. From that standpoint, okay, good. Okay.
I mean, but we're talking about fertility.
But you said we're talking about
two to tango.
But you're talking about delaying, right? So we're assuming that if we're delaying, that both parties are able to reproduce at the same level.
No, that's not necessarily true.
All right, keep it moving.
That's not necessarily true, right? People delay their fertility not knowing whether or not they are fertile or whether or not they are infertile.
So we talking about how, like, listen, if you in your 20s and you're like, look, I'm trying to get into medical school. I don't have time to get pregnant right now. Mm-hmm. Let me wait till I finish. But by the time you finish and you become an attending, when you're making a lot more money and you think that you're going to have a lot more freedom, you're talking about hitting that finish line at what, mid-30s?
Okay.
For dudes, we good. For women...
What does that mean, Nee? Like,
there's no biological clock, so to speak, with men, whereas with women, there's that biological clock, right?
Okay, Nee. Yes, in that respect, yes. But we're talking about fertility. We're not just talking about biological clocks.
But why are you acting like what I'm saying is off? Like, I don't
No, but
understand.
you're saying that it's a woman's topic, and it's not just.
All right, so we got off of that now, but I'm just talking about this situation. Like, you acting like the situation that I gave to you is like completely.
Anywho, so you delayed fertility, didn't you?
I did.
Oh, exactly. So, hello, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about delaying your childbearing, right? Whether you are a man or a woman. Now, do women have less of an advantage in terms of delaying their childcare or their childbearing? Yes, absolutely, right? Because quote unquote, the biological clock is ticking X, Y, and Z. Women go through menopause. Men do experience a little bit of less fertility as they get older, but not to, right. But it's not apples to apples at all.
Robert De Niro.
Right? It's not apples to apples at all, right? So from that respect, yes. And you and I went through our own infertility journey. We graduated from med school, graduated from residency, and then a couple of years after we graduated from residency is when we got married, right? And from there, we actually...
7 years after medical school, we got married.
Yes, 7 years after medical school, we got married.
And then it was time for the baby making.
It was time for the baby making, but there was no baby made. There was no baby made. And we could not figure out, necessarily how we were going to make this baby happen, especially after we started doing IVF. So we jumped straight through IVF, right? So we didn't have to go through IVF first. But because of my age in particular, that's where you talk about the clock ticking, right? You don't have to smirk me. You don't have to smirk. What are you smirking about?
Nothing.
What are you smirking? Tell. We potted, right? We potted, right? So tell me about the smirk. What's the smirk?
I'm just saying that we tried at first, and then I think because of your training, and you did some training in fertility?
No, I did OB training.
But didn't you do something with some attendings who are like fertility specialists and stuff?
That's part of my OB training.
So you did training in fertility?
I did OB training, which fertility is a part of.
I did some general surgery training.
Oh my God!
I mean, I did some neurosurgery and general. So I trained a little bit in neurosurgery.
Okay.
Right, but anyway, keep it moving. So that's all I'm just saying is like, okay. So go ahead. So we
were talking about the smirk, but whatever.
We got into IVF. Yo, Renee is on one today, guys. I think because she's hot. Let's get it moving. I'm drinking my Izzy. I'm
about
good.
To be what's the name? A do the right thing, freaking powder keg up in here.
I have today's forecast for you. Hot.
But anyway, so yeah.
This is what happens when I let you host.
I'm not hosting. I thought we were just potting.
Okay, go ahead.
What is wrong with you today?
Nothing. Go ahead. Keep it moving.
This is what the heat wave is doing, folks. So we went through our own infertility journey. We jumped straight to IVF.
Yes.
However, IVF did not work, right? And that's one of the things that a lot of times people don't understand is that science and technology isn't always going to be the way that you think it's going to be, right? Because you think, you got an egg, you got a sperm, you put them together, they fertilize, and, you replace it back into the uterus, and you should have a baby. But that is not what happened to us, right? So several cycles. I might have had...
I think you had at least 5 or 6 cycles we went through.
Yeah, 5 or 6 cycles, 5 or 6 miscarriages.
Yeah, didn't work.
Right? Didn't work. Eventually, I started doing acupuncture and started doing massage. And I think my massage therapist was doing Reiki, actually. That's the one where you kind of don't touch the person, but you give it, whatever. Anyway. So she was doing a little bit of that, but also doing, regular massage as well. And after a while, we decided, I think after the 7th miscarriage, we decided that we were going to pause, right? We were going to pause. And you said...
I said that you should consider taking time off from work so that you could focus on getting pregnant.
You said, I think you need to quit your job. Those were your exact words, actually. I think you need to quit your job. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. But then on a long drive to and from wherever I was going, I had the epiphany that I had helped so many people, you know, grow their families, and now it was time to grow ours. And I wasn't able to focus 100% on that. And so that's when I decided that you were right. And I put in for my resignation.
I was what?
You were right. I don't have a problem saying that you were right. I don't have a problem saying that. But anyway,
I was what?
You were right. And I put in for my resignation. I had a 3-month clause, right? So I had to basically put in a 3-month notice. And during that time, we didn't do any more IVF at all. But what I did continue to do
what we were continuing to do is we keep moving.
What I did continue to do was I continued to do acupuncture and do massage. And I did that.
And what else were we doing?
Can I finish the story? Because now you tell me I'm hosting, but now you be like, you're interrupting me. So let me tell the story. So anyway, so I did acupuncture and massage, and I alternated those every week. So I did once a week, and I alternated every week for about 3 months. And yes, we did a little hanky-panky.
A little?
A little. Little hanky-panky. But
I don't think it was a little.
The idea was that we were going to do yet another IVF cycle, right? We were going to do yet another IVF cycle at the end when I finally finished working. The problem was that I was pregnant before we could do our next IVF cycle. Well, which wasn't really a problem. It was a problem for IVF, but it wasn't a problem for us. Yeah. And that's how we had our first son.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to speak to our guest who's going to be coming on. Her name is Michelle Oravitz. Michelle Oravitz, and she is the founder of Wholesome Lotus. And she essentially focuses on infertility, delaying fertility because of career and all kinds of topics related to that. I believe she's an acupuncturist. She'll tell us more about herself, but I wanted to kind of get into that topic, especially because I think we have an audience who is susceptible to having a very similar experience that we had.
Yeah, of course. Like all of them are, the majority of, I think, students are delaying their fertility to finish their schooling because it's like, I ain't got time to be pregnant while you trying to go through residency and stuff, or I ain't trying to chase no kids while it happens. It's tough, but you see few and far between of people doing that. So let's bring on Michelle so we can talk about this, all right?
Yeah.
Michelle Oravitz, welcome to Docs Outside the Box. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you on here. We definitely wanted to get into talking about this topic of fertility, careers, delaying, and all the things that go with it, because our audience, of course, as you know, mainly physicians, medical students, residents, and many of them are not starting their families in the times that maybe people who are not on that path are starting their fertility journeys or their childbearing years. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll jump into what should we do in order to preserve our fertility or deal with the fact that our fertility isn't exactly going the way we thought it would.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. So my name is Michelle Oravitz, and my background actually started in a completely different field. I used to be an architect working in New York City. I was in totally like knee deep in corporate America, and I had irregular periods, and that's how it really started. And I went to try to like fix it. I mean, there's no fix, but like I would only get the birth control pill. And that was like the only solution that I had. And I would go on and off until I finally said I need to do something different. So I found an acupuncturist, and he completely regulated my period. And I was like, this stuff is insane. And I felt better too. I felt better overall, like less stress. And I also found that like at work, I wasn't taking things as personal. Like I just felt overall better. Like my energy was moving more freely. So this is really cool because I went for one thing, but then I had all these other benefits. And then it just lit a fire of interest in me. And I wanted to work with people. Like most of the time at work, I was just in front of the computer. So it was something that I was really interested in working with people. Plus, like, I think when we start out as patients, we're really amazed by our own transformation. And it was something that I really wanted to pass on to other people, and eventually went back to school for Ayurveda. My husband's a doctor, actually. He's an emergency medicine doctor. He's a DO. And he actually pushed me to go back to school. He's like, you don't love what you do, just like study this. So it's kind of cool because we have East and West, and I learn a lot from him and he learns a lot from me. So
I got a
that's
feeling
pretty
you do
much
a lot
it.
of acupuncture on him when he comes home
I do.
with all the stress that he has as an
Oh,
ED
yeah.
doc.
Amazingly, though, he's perfect for his job. He is built like nobody else I've ever met. He just can handle, like, he doesn't take it in. He's like really easy with stress. He's got such a chill personality. I'm like, I would be freaked out and I would get emotionally involved into every case. Like, it would be completely different.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of doctors who just, it's hard to separate out. So
Yeah.
so I heard you say you're an Ayurvedic practitioner. Is that right?
Yes. So the first thing I studied when we were in New York and we moved to Florida, 2004, way back. And so the first thing I did was study Ayurveda because it was a 2-year program. It was a little small, like shorter than the acupuncture. And then once we had kids, I eventually knew I was going to go back to school for acupuncture.
What is Ayurveda? What is that?
So it's kind of like the cousin of acupuncture. It's ancient Indian medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to acupuncture, the real goal is to create balance. So they look at like body types, and each body types has elements that sometimes is stronger. Some people have like more fire. Based on that, it's kind of like we have like these ecosystems in our bodies. Based
Is that
on
like
that,
the chi or something like that? Kind of similar to that?
Similar. Well, they call it prana, and Chinese medicine calls it qi, and that's kind of like life force vitality. But also on top of that, we also have like elements in our body. Sometimes we have more like water and dampness, and that shows up in many different ways. So depending on what we have in our constitution, Ayurvedic medicine will prescribe herbs, and then also diet that has of certain elements. So like, for example, if you look at like leaves or like cilantro, which is very cooling, certain foods are very cooling. So if somebody has a lot of heat, they would give them cooling herbs or food that would lower the heat. So it's basically whatever they have too much of, we give them the opposite. So it's kind of similar. But then also on top of that, they do a lot of body work, massage work with Ayurvedic enemas. That's like a big thing too.
Really?
Yep.
So I bet you if you were looking at, is it Prada?
So prana is basically similar to chi, like the meaning of chi, which is like life force vitality. But it's also like, it also contains oxygen, but it also is very intelligent, and it really is what animates our bodies.
I think for me it'd be cool, like cool water. That's my prana.
I don't know about
I don't know if y'all could tell that and stuff. Michelle, I got a question for you. I got a question for you because I think, for as a couple, we're both in medicine and we are used to like quantitative type things, right? I's and O's and ones and zeros, and it's data driven and everything, right? So we did IVF about 4 or 5 times, and then after like the 4th time, then she said, well, maybe we should consider acupuncture. And I'm like, acupuncture? Like, we got this IVF thing. Let's just do this IVF thing. Why are we going to do IVF? So I'm very interested. Why are we going to do acupuncture?
Yeah.
So I was very interested in your story as to like how you came to a point of deciding to go that acupuncture way, because when you described it, it was kind of like, well, I tried this, and then you kind of, what was that decision process like to go and try something that's kind of a little bit off the beaten path?
Oh, so
was that a hard decision,
when
or
I
just
went
like
to an acupuncturist?
for yourself.
Basically, for many,
periods,
and I talked to my husband a lot about this. Like, Western medicine has amazing, like, I mean, thank God we have antibiotics, and there's certain medicines that are really strong. With things that are more subtle, natural medicine, I think, does well, where it's like diet, herbals, something that's not quite as strong. So the only solution I really got from Western medicine was the birth control pill. And it never made sense to me, even back then, because I was like, okay, it's going to make me feel like it's regular, but it's not. It's not really regular, because if I get off, we're not really fixing the problem. And when I was 17, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Even at 17, I didn't know anything about this. My grandmother, though, did talk to me a lot about like food and plants. And so I remember she did plant seeds way back when about nature, and kind of like what the creator that made us creates, everything that the creator made is for us, like naturally. So I remember that kind of like struck a chord somewhere like in my subconscious mind. And so eventually, I mean, I went for years of on and off the birth control pill. And I was like, at 25, I went away for about 3 months. I traveled, and that was one of my off times, not on the birth control pill for like over a year. And the whole time I was away, about 3 months, I didn't get my period. So this is kind of like how irregular things were. So when I came back, I was already 25, and I said to my mom, I really need to do something different because this isn't normal. And that's when she found the acupuncturist, and I went to him, and he was the only one that regulated me. And what I love too is that he asked me so many questions. He got really into the intricacies of my inner workings, like how I felt, how I slept, my poop, the shape, the color, like even my blood. I mean,
Your
to get really
tongue.
detailed, everything.
Yeah.
So many details. So
Yeah.
even my dreams, like how do I dream? Do I remember my dreams? Do they disturb me? Do I wake up in the middle of it? Like all these weird things. And I was like, why does that? Everything's relevant. It seems like, so it was definitely blew me away as something that worked, but without the side effects.
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience, right? Because, Nee's question, well, why did I want to do acupuncture? And that's not something that I learned necessarily in school. We talked about acupuncture in school. We learned about
that was a lecture.
It was a lecture,
not even
right?
It was all the lectures.
Exactly.
That was like
it was
one.
like a traditional Chinese medicine lecture, right? Where they taught us a little bit. But I'm always of the belief that Western medicine can't be the only thing, right? Because there are so many different remedies for centuries before Western medicine was ever a thing. And so to me, Eastern medicine was something that was never off the table.
Right.
And so, I decided let's try acupuncture because one is that we're osteopathic physicians.
Oh, so like my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're osteopaths. And one of the things that really struck me is the philosophy of osteopathic medicine, which, the body is a unit, and especially the body has the ability to heal itself. And for me, I thought, okay, well, if I have the potential to actually reproduce, then I'd like to give my body that chance to be able to do that on its own. And so after so many cycles of Western medicine, of actually pumping things into my body, which I didn't have a problem with, and I still don't have a problem with. Obviously, I'm an OBGYN, and it works for some people, but it wasn't working for me.
Right.
Yeah.
It just wasn't working for me. And so I felt like I needed some sort of balance, if you will. So I felt the same way as you.
Yeah.
That just something was missing.
For sure. And also like probably the majority of my patients are going through IVF, and I'm supporting them. So I support them with the egg quality, and I support them with the uterine lining, depending on where they're at with their IVF. So it works hand in hand. And there was many times where people come to me, they want to try naturally. And I'm like, you know what? I think that you might benefit from like possibly looking into seeing if you have endometriosis, possibly surgery. Like, the two work amazingly together. And so that's where I think that's the future, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
what's the type of typical client that you have, and are you dealing with those who are mainly a little bit older, those who are maybe more professional? What's the typical client that you're dealing with that you're able to perform your services on?
Most of them are either approaching 40 or after 40. And then the oldest one that just recently got pregnant is 46. So it's a pretty cool things, like
Yeah.
I like challenges. I'll be honest. And to me, it's like, I got to figure it out. So it kind of works, in our world, like to try to figure out what people need. But yes, a lot of people are professionals. And there was a point during COVID, because I live in Florida, a lot of people were coming in from New York, and a lot of people were very driven, professional women, got married a little later. So it was the same thing. And it's funny because today I was actually having this thought. I was doing yoga and I just kind of randomly had this thought. I mean, I literally would suggest to my own kids, my own girls, if they get to the age of 30 and they don't meet somebody, freeze your eggs. I think it would be silly not to. That would be probably like the top thing that I would recommend. I see people now who luckily froze their eggs at a really peak time and are now fertilizing it with their husbands, and they're good quality.
Right.
Yeah, we had probably about 2 years ago, there was a real famous influencer, medical influencer. She's OB, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she's OB. And she talked about how she froze her eggs.
She went through that process. Yeah.
Because similar, I can't remember the specifics, but she decided to freeze her eggs so that later on, when she's ready, like you said, like there's, it's expensive though.
It is very expensive.
Yeah,
It is.
expensive.
It is. That's the only drawback. But it's if you could do it. And I think that they do have loans. And I've even had people work at Starbucks temporarily because they have amazing benefits.
Let's talk about that because that's a thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's
so
a
people
thing.
People will change a job.
No, not change a job necessarily. I not too long ago, I heard of a doctor who took a job at Starbucks, not gave up being a doctor, but took a job at Starbucks because they have amazing fertility benefits.
They do.
Yes.
So listen, I mean, it's there. Why wouldn't you take advantage of it? So people do. No, I've had some of my patients do that, and I'm like, that is so smart. Like honestly,
and if you're a resident,
that's a whole other
thing. If you're a resident, right, that might not necessarily work, but maybe as a med student, I don't know. I mean, maybe. You technically shouldn't be working in medical school, they say, but who knows? Or if you're really early attending, that might be the way to go, Take a few months, work at Starbucks right after you finish your residency before you start your permanent job as an attending.
No, totally.
That
Listen,
might be a thing.
when I early on after graduating, I studied architecture. I worked as a waitress for the first couple of months because I met a lot of people and it was fun. And I was like, I just rather have that freedom and get to know a new town before I start working.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that definitely is a thing. The Starbucks fertility hack is definitely a thing. We just had this discussion about
because I just found an article that says some Starbucks workers forgo paychecks to access IVF features. Some IVF treatments. Some workers say generous benefits like IVF coverage don't make up. Oh, really? So this is kind of talking about, but I guess it's very well known that Starbucks has amazing IVF benefits.
Yeah, amazing.
So we were just having this discussion about whether or not this is a female problem, and my thought is that it is not simply a female problem, but someone, I won't say who, kind of sort of disagrees with me.
Well, I just said that this is something that women have to deal with and have to think about more so than men, because it's not really like men who are known not to have, men who are not known to have fertility issues, right? You normally hear about the Al Pacinos, you hear about the Robert De Niros, right?
Absolutely.
So you're like, all right, so I'm going to be having kids into my 80s and 90s, right?
It's just not the same anymore. I'm sorry to tell you this. It is
I regret
declining
to inform
right
you.
now. It really is declining. Sperm quality, sperm count is declining. Unfortunately, and there was a study that just recently came out finding nanoplastics in semen. So that's, environmental factors. I mean, there's so many different things right now
Yeah.
impacting both male and female fertility.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, delaying fertility is often thought of as being a female problem. But, you know, it really is a problem of men, women, couples, essentially.
100%.
Yeah. And, you know, you can't just peg it on one or the other. And being an OBGYN, I will tell you, I have had patients who I remember I had one patient who came to me adamant that she was the infertile one. She had gone to a previous doctor and they had done some of the workup, not all of the workup. They had given her Clomid and she conceived. And so when she came back, after some years after she had her first one, she came to me and she said, listen, I need Clomid. And I said, well, I need a workup because I don't have any records on you. I don't have anything. And she goes, no, it is me. The last time I took Clomid, then we got pregnant. And I said to her, listen, I typically treat couples when I'm treating infertility. And it's because you never know. I could do all the things to you, but if your husband is infertile, you will not get pregnant. So she was so adamant. I said to her, I will make a deal with you. I will give you 3 months to get pregnant. I'll give you the Clomid. I will give you 3 months to get pregnant. But if at that time you are not pregnant, you will go through the entire workup and you will not argue with me. Yes? Deal. Great. 3 months later, she comes back. She is not pregnant. I order a semen analysis and it's the sperm.
Wow, look at that. And
It's
you
the
know,
sperm.
it's interesting that you say that.
Actually, the point that I was making, or that I made, and that you corrected me on, actually, there's an article in Reviews in Urology. This came out in 2011. It's showing that obviously, as the male ages, there is decreasing in fertility.
Yeah.
So
There's
I'm just saying,
fertility.
but I'm just saying that the prevailing thought is that men don't have to worry about this and stuff. You know
I
what
think
I'm
it's
saying?
a
Which
misconception.
is wrong. Yeah. It's a
It's
misconception.
one of those myths that people like take as fact. And what's interesting is I had another patient who struggled. She had secondary. So she had her first 2 boys with her husband. So the thought is it's her, you know, she thought she went to an RE who didn't really want to look at her husband or didn't even mention it. And she was like, why don't you look at my husband? So she
Right.
wasn't crazy about him, but her FSH was really high. So it could have been like all roads pointing to her. She came to me for a year, finally figured out the husband had a varicocele. And it turned
there you
out
go.
they did the surgery, waited a couple of months, and they got pregnant.
There you go. Yeah. So you just never know. And,
True, 100%.
you know, it's important. Yeah, it's important. You know, if you're, you know, I've heard men before say, well, you know, I never tried to get anybody pregnant before. Or, you know, I've been with someone for a long time and, you know, she didn't get pregnant. You can't tell just based on your previous experience whether or not you are the infertile one. You just can't tell.
You cannot.
I got
to
a
be
question.
evaluated.
I got a question for your typical patient, for a typical, you know, who would come to see you. Like, what is the typical amount of time that you're working with them, and like the time scale, and what are we talking about, like on a week to week type basis? How does that look?
So, of course, everybody's different, but I'm going to say kind of like as a general, like weekly or more. Sometimes people, if they really have a lot going on, I'll suggest twice a week, just in the beginning, just to get their bodies kind of like used to the treatment, kind of getting more into self-healing mode.
How long is each session?
It's about so I see the patients and then check their pulse every single time, kind of like do a little touch base. The first session's like really covering the whole history. So we're able to just kind of see what's new. And then the needle retention is about 25 to 30 minutes. And then, so all in all, like 45 to 60 minutes.
Yeah.
For follow-ups.
Okay. And this is usually like acupuncture till they get pregnant, or acupuncture through pregnancy? How does that work?
Depends. Sometimes they're doing IVF, and then that's when I'll treat for IVF. But I always work on egg quality, regardless if it's IVF or if it's natural. Sometimes we'll start including herbs not with IVF. I will never use herbs with IVF because
IVF.
they do have a hormonal stimulating effect, and it can counteract some of the hormones that people are taking. So that's when I'll just rely on supplements. So depending on what is going on and if they're able to do hormones, sometimes, herbals, and then sometimes we work on getting their menstrual cycle regulated. Some people have amenorrhea after coming off the birth control pill, which they've gotten for 20 years straight sometimes.
Yeah.
So we work on that. Sometimes it's hypothalamic, so we'll work on diet and maybe lessening the intensity of exercise. So it really depends. Typically, I always say give it at least 3.5 months to really see a difference, because it's not, we work very much on kind of nature's rhythm and timeline. So it's a little slower than what I think a lot of people are used to just in modern day times.
Yeah.
How about men? Do you ever have men as patients?
When women are able to get their husbands or the men come, I'm always happy, because it doesn't always happen. I really would love to have both. I really would love to have both. Sometimes it's it could be like pulling teeth. So what I do suggest is certain supplements kind of through the wife, and I'm just like, okay, have them maybe take a good multi, and then certain ones that can help with like sperm quality as well.
Right.
Oh, okay. So it's men who they don't necessarily have to have a condition. It could just be
No, it's like prenatals.
Okay, got you.
So like women who are healthy
You're
take
optimizing.
prenatals. Men benefit from multi as well. And here's the thing too: most of the time they'll check the count, they'll check the shape, the morphology, and the motility, but they're not going to check the DNA. So they don't know if the DNA is good. I think everybody benefits, whether it's a woman or a man, from antioxidants.
Right.
Now, what are whether it's the points that you're hitting, or is it triggering, or what's a lot of the terminology I'm not really good at, so please correct me. But the points that you are going after on the body, what exactly is the effect that you're countering? Like, is it the sympathetic? Is it the parasympathetic? Like, take us through that also, because I think people are
so
really
the
interested in that
acupuncture
also.
points. Yeah, I'll give you kind of like a generalized. So like I pretty much will cover like 3 different main parts within acupuncture. So Chinese medicine in general has many different modalities or tools. The 2 main ones are herbals and acupuncture. Herbals is like the pharmacy, but it's just done with like more natural plants and things that we'll find in nature, versus acupuncture, which is kind of mechanical, electrical, I like to say. And so one's chemical, one's mechanical, electrical. I'm just really simplifying it though, just to kind of give people an idea. And then there's 3 categories within acupuncture. One is the most familiar one, which is points that are on meridians. And those meridians, even though we can access them in certain points, which are called acupuncture points, where they come close to the surface of the skin, those same meridians run very deep into the body. So we're almost able to, we are able to access areas deep within the body, within that channel, in areas that could be like, say, your hand. Your hand can access digestive system. So there are certain points with certain indications, and then we create kind of a symphony of points, or like a protocol based on a person's pattern. So whatever we diagnose. So the first category of points are points that belong to channels. And usually all of these channels or meridians are going deep within the body. So it's almost like highways. And then every so often with the highways, they go really fast, but then they go out and there's little exit points where you can enter and exit. So that's kind of like how, and I'm simplifying it so that people can get an idea. It's like a circuit of energy. And so that's one aspect. And what these meridians carry are chi, which is life force vitality. Very similar. It's the same thing as prana, but it's just kind of described a little differently, which is interesting because you see in different cultures, people point to the same thing, but they describe it a little differently. But it really is, it's kind of life force vitality. It's basically what gets us to move. And the reason why it's hard to dissect and understand is because you can only see it on a living person. You can't study it on a cadaver because it no longer is there. It animates the body. It's what gives us life. And so So that is one aspect. The other category is there's certain points that are individual. They're freestanding and they're their own thing. So they're like extraordinary points. They're just unique and they're their own like point that don't belong to anything. Then you have the auricular. So the whole ear basically reflects your whole body. So there are even some acupuncturists and practitioners that only do the ear. That's like their specialty. It's like their own, thing.
Yeah.
And they'll even diagnose based on how the ear looks and feels. So like if it's red in certain spots, they like know the whole map. Most of us, if we specialize in a particular thing, we'll memorize the points that are applicable. So I do a lot of times like the uterus, the ovaries, the endocrine. Sometimes I'll do a combination for the sympathetic, parasympathetic. So most of the time with acupuncture, going to the nervous system, it regulates the nervous system. So it does get you sometimes most of us are amped up. Most of us are in sympathetic. And so it gets you in the parasympathetic. It kind of relaxes the body. And what I find is that by itself, when you first start to do that, creates symptoms and people feel really tired. But all that is, it's like, I always compare it like to having a wine at the end of a week. You're feeling energized. You're like on adrenaline. All of a sudden you like have that wine. You're like done. And it doesn't make you like, it's almost what it does is it relaxes you enough to feel your own tiredness. And that's kind of what acupuncture can do. And in the beginning, people are like, I cannot wake up. I'm so exhausted. And people with like insomnia, they're like, but now it's like the opposite. Now I can't even wake up.
Sleep too.
They're like that for a good month. And then all of a sudden they have energy. They're a lot more focused and their sleep is a lot more effective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate
thank you
that.
for describing that. I can definitely say that.
Like they covered that in that one lecture, though.
In that one.
Yeah, and then you move on. They move on really quick. So that's why it's like I was asking these questions because I think the audience wants to know, like, like what state are we trying to?
Right.
What state are we going after?
Yeah.
Are we trying to be in, for optimal fertility? I think that's really important.
Yeah,
So
I can definitely say that I experienced some of that as well.
So and it's one of those things that you have to experience to know and to recognize. So that's interesting because you actually felt it as a patient. And so the actual optimal state we're really looking for is a state of homeostasis. And this is the one thing that we can 100% have a word for in Western and Eastern. They call it the yin and yang harmony balance. And then Western medicine calls it homeostasis. And we know that nothing can survive without homeostasis.
Right.
So we can all agree on that.
Yeah. It's interesting. We talked about men, we talked about women, but that, kind of the dictum is always that, oh, well, it's a woman's problem. But we know that infertility affects couples and the grief of infertility. That's one thing that I don't think a lot of people talk about enough. When you are treating patients, particularly couples, are you seeing that grief? What are some of the things that your patients are coming to you with, especially because
it's a tough subject.
Yeah, I mean it's a very tough subject.
It's a tough subject.
And I can definitely say that we have experienced as a couple that grief of having that hope that IVF was going to work. We go through the process.
There's even resentment too, isn't there?
Right? I mean, there could be some resentment.
Oh, yeah. I see that actually. It's one of the check marks. I put emotions on my intake form and I see a lot of resentment.
Yeah. So, what are some things that I guess your patients have experienced and how are you, as the person who's treating them, how are you dealing with that or helping them to deal with that?
That is actually a really good question. I really appreciate that question because it's a really good question. And
good job, Renee.
It's a very, it's a common thing. It's something that you see a lot of people going through. And yes, I have a whole conversation. My first initial time talking is always virtual because I like to take my time and not rush into treatment. And I spend a lot of time just letting them talk, like listening and allowing them to speak. And I ask questions. And that's really in the beginning how, and I feel like that by itself is therapeutic, because many times what I find is that the men and the women process grief differently. See,
Yeah.
that is that true.
Yeah, that's true.
True laughter.
Let's dive into that.
Yes.
Let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that. It's
Yeah.
a podcast. Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah,
What do you see?
So women going through loss, they'll feel this primal. This is how they're expressing to me. That it's like this primal loss, and we're talking even pregnancy loss. There's a primal aspect to this for women that I noticed, because they are a lot more attached or identified with motherhood.
Yes.
Whereas most of the time, men, while they want to be fathers and 100%, their big thing is providing. And they kind of like their Achilles heel, I guess I want to say, look, the sensitive spot is work. You know,
Right.
that'll be like the thing that'll really rattle them, because they feel like they need to be providing, and that's kind of like and this is generalized, obviously.
Right.
Everybody's
Right.
different.
Absolutely.
But there are tendencies. And if you learn the yin and the yang, you'll start to see that there is this kind of balance that tends to happen. And there's certain traits and personalities. And so women take it as such a primal thing that it almost is it's like their identification. And if they feel that is not like working as expected, there's so much shame around it. And there's so much, it's a very complicated emotional place to be in. So I talk to them a lot, and I just allow them really to express themselves. And one of the things that I do suggest often, especially if there was pregnancy loss, is to write a letter to the baby, this little living form. And another thing that I actually do want to mention, this is a very sensitive topic, but I think that it's important to bring up, is I've had people with previous abortions that have at the time knew that this was the only option they had. You know, it was something that they felt like aligned with at the time, but afterwards felt it kind of crept up as guilt. And of course, we assign meaning, as humans. It's kind of like the human condition. The meaning comes a lot of times like, oh, now that I do actually want to have a baby, am I being punished?
And by
is this
being
something
punished,
that's, so this is kind of like the things that I do see repeatedly with a lot of my patients.
Right.
Did you experience grief during that time? Because I think I did, actually. I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I didn't. This provider part. The one thing that I had an issue with was, damn, like we spending all this money and it's not working, and it's a feeling of wow, like
Is it wasted?
No, it's not that it's wasted. It's like I can't believe that we're at a point where you can throw. It was more of like a despair. It was just like, so we got a situation that not even money can fix and science can fix. That's where I was at. I was like, this is an issue. So I'm sorry I cut you off though.
No, I mean, I certainly did, experience grief, especially in the way that you described, right? The, the primal, like, okay, this is something that I've wanted to do pretty much all my life. I've always wanted to be a mother, and now it's not working. It's not working. Did I wait too long? Did I do something wrong? You start kind of having questions about what you've done and whether or not you've contributed to this in some way, shape, or form. But you as much as you try to do that, you still can't rationalize it because there's nothing that you can pinpoint to say, well, I did this and therefore it resulted in this. And so you kind of have these questions that really have nowhere to go. There really is no answer to these questions.
No. And it's really like we're at a time where the environment, like just the toxins, and there's so many things that are happening that are 100% out of people's control. Like you cannot control what's in the water. You cannot control and those things impact both men and women. Those are one of the things. I mean, there's so many other things. So like it really is not anybody's fault. Like this is just something that we're in right now.
Right. Now, you talked about going back to the toxins and then talking about what you would say to your daughters when they hit 30. Would you recommend that men bank their sperm?
I
at
do.
all?
I mean,
Are
I'm
you
going to
serious?
say something that's kind of like, well, it's sort of private and personal, but it was kind of cool to me because, so my daughter's boyfriend, she's in college, and her
Mhm.
boyfriend's like so sweet, so nice, very smart, and he's very into his health. And he's
Mhm.
reading about what's happening with sperm, like literally. And I'm amazed that at college, like there's somebody thinking about their future.
Yeah.
And I told him, listen, if it's something
Well,
that you're
those
really
price
concerned,
tags, though.
what's
You
that?
should hold with those price tags of college and tuition. They should be really smart.
This is true.
50 grand. Let's be real.
Expectation versus reality, though, you know.
Right.
You don't know where people's minds are, but
Right,
it was really
right.
nice to see that the thoughtfulness to think about that, and to be
Mhm.
concerned because it is something that people should be concerned with. So I said, listen, if it's something that you're concerned with, because he was saying, you know, I see that it's declining, I see problems with
Mhm.
testosterone, like all these different things, and he knows that I'm in this world. So he's like, can
Right.
I just ask you questions? And so I could see that he was concerned, like legitimately concerned. I
Yeah.
said, listen, like bank it, like freeze
Mhm.
it. And he was like, yeah. He goes, I guess that's it. I was like, you could actually, men can freeze it for longer. And I think it's
Yes.
cheaper
Yes, it's
than
cheaper.
women.
Yeah. Yeah. So men out there, you know, all the med
Consider it.
students out there, pre-med students, non-traditional pre-med students, all of you delaying your childbearing, you know,
Yes.
this might be something to really think about. You know, it really does hit home for us, which is why we wanted to have you on the show, because when I saw what you were all about, I said to Nee, I said, we need to have her on the show because this is definitely something that has hit us
Mhm.
personally, but it's not something that people talk about with our kind of audience, right? People are not talking to doctors about, hey,
And
you
it
might go
happens.
through this whole career
But it
journey and then
happens
you
a-
end up not having a
It happens
family
a
or
lot.
having trouble.
It has to happen a lot because the
Yeah.
average graduate is 27, 28.
Mhm.
That's from medical
From
school.
medical school.
Right.
That's from med school.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the average residency has to be anywhere between 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So you're talking about like,
People who are in their mid-30s
Right.
potentially. And when we talk about
Right.
women who, when you hit 35, right, the dictum again is that decline happens, you know, it's a steep decline in terms of egg number and certainly egg quality.
Mhm.
And so, you know, you potentially have not just delayed your childbearing, but you might have actually delayed relationships
Mhm. Mhm.
to some extent, which
Yeah.
then, you know, rolls right into your childbearing. So there are a lot
Yeah.
of students who say, well, you know, I can't really be in a relationship right now because, you know, I'm so focused on school. I don't want to, you know, take the time or, you know, take the risk of
Not
being
to
in this
mention,
relationship.
also the circadian rhythm disruptions from the overnight shifts, which does
yes.
impact your menstrual cycle, and ovulation can impact fertility. The other aspect of is high stress. Probably not eating,
Yeah.
nourishing your body the way it's supposed to. I mean, not to stress
Yeah.
people out, but what I say is that obviously it's not to say like, oh my God, your life's screwed now because you have to
Right.
do this. Not at all. Actually, you can counteract a lot of these things. One of the things is really cool is earthing, putting your feet on the earth can help your circadian rhythm get back faster. So it's good for after jet lag. It's good in general.
Oh,
And there's
that's what we'll
science
do
behind
after
it.
we come back from Ghana.
Watch the Earthing movie. Oh, from Ghana. Yeah.
Yeah.
Watch the Earthing movie. It's free. You can find it on YouTube. And they
Okay.
show studies. They did, I believe it was a thermography on inflammation, how it lowers immediately after putting your feet
Really?
on the grounding mat or going like on the earth.
And you said it's earthing or?
Earthing. So they call it earthing, grounding. So the
Yeah.
Earthing
Okay,
movie
okay.
is, I highly recommend it. And I tell my
Okay.
patients to do it all the time. So that's one of the things they can anchor their circadian rhythms by looking at the blue light, the sun, early in the morning. So that anchors them, because that's one of the ways you can like really impact jet lag or like improve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fast.
So one of the things when we first moved into where we live now, there were these blackout shades, the blackout shades, and it drove me nuts It drove me nuts. And so we had somebody come in and just rearrange some things. And one of the things that I asked her to do was to remove those blackout shades and put shades that let a little bit of light in the morning.
So that your brain can know.
Yeah, so that my brain knows when to wake up. Let me tell you, it's made a world of difference. It really has made a world of difference. So that's interesting that you say that, because I always say to me, I'm like, I wake up with the sun.
Yeah.
That's usually when I
best
wake
way.
up, I wake up with the sun. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
I think I found it, the Earthing movie. Is that what you want? Okay. This came out in 2019.
Like, it'll blow your mind.
Yeah.
Because they have numbers. They'll give you numbers, research. That's what you're going to be like, oh my God. It also decreases the time of healing, like wound healing. It's crazy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Okay. Really interesting to know. But yeah, no, this has been really, really helpful.
Yeah, Michelle, this has been great.
Yeah, this has
really
been
interesting.
very, very interesting.
I wish we had more time to talk about it, because there's a lot of, it's just a lot of psychology also. I
Yeah.
think that goes in not only in understanding fertility, but also like the psyche of someone who comes in to probably see you, where they're at, with their lifestyle, where they're at with their, just with their, where they are with their mind.
Yeah.
And, is this a point of, what's the word I want to use? Like the last resort? Or is it like you, like Renee, when she knew, like when we started deciding that we were going to have a family, we did natural for a short period of time, a very short period of time. And then she said, well, we have to jump into that. The one last question I have to have is, do you see a difference between electro acupuncture, like with the lasers, and with traditional
Electrode?
You mean the laser, or adding electric stimulation to the needles? Or do you mean like lasers versus needles?
Exact, the former, the latter, lasers versus needles. Is there a difference?
I mean, listen, you could use lasers
because some IVF clinics do that stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, the one that I did get that once.
Yeah, they'll definitely stimulate something, so it's better than nothing. But I'm a purist. I like the actual needles going in, because I feel like it just stimulates a little bit more mechanically. But the lasers do help as well, and sometimes they use it for kids who are afraid of needles, or people who are afraid of needles. So like, it does definitely do something. But I don't. I usually use needles, like in my office.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I personally like the needles. I'll end this here, but so my experience, I will tell you. So the first time I got pregnant, I went to my friend. She's an acupuncturist. And she actually just started out as my acupuncturist. We're friends now.
Oh, nice.
But the first time I went to her, I was supposed to do an IVF cycle. Something happened. Either the cycle, I can't remember if the cycle got interrupted or if I miscarried. I can't remember what it was. But I was in such a bad place that my first appointment, I called her and I said, I'm canceling the appointment. And she asked me what happened. I think I miscarried. Yeah, I must have miscarried. I definitely miscarried, because that's when we went to the office in New Jersey. I had gotten to 6 weeks. That was the furthest I had ever gone, was to 6 weeks. And I said, I miscarried. I'm going to cancel the appointment. And she said, please come in. I just want to talk to you. So I obliged, and I go in and I speak to her. And I don't remember what she said, but I remember I felt like, okay, I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back. And so I go back to her, and this was about in July or August, maybe late July. I went to her in April. Then I was going to her every week. And about the time that I reached late July, I remember her telling me to come in at a certain time of my cycle. And so I go in, and she does the needling. She's a purist as well. So she did the needling. And I can't tell you that I've ever experienced something like this before. But she does the needling, and she leaves the room, and she says, just relax. And let me tell you, Michelle, I don't know what happened, but my mind literally went to almost seeing my inner organs, like seeing the egg.
Whoa. Okay.
Seriously,
All right.
seeing the egg, like seeing myself ovulate,
Mhm.
and just I don't know what that was, but it was
I could tell you.
it was very strange. It was
Yeah.
extremely strange, and I was like, I've never experienced something like this before. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant.
Oh my God.
Fast forward about 18 months later, we try another IVF cycle because we're trying to get pregnant again after I've had my first son. And the IVF cycle didn't even work at all. Like not even a little bit. But at that point, I wasn't doing acupuncture anymore.
Yeah.
But then my cycles were completely off. They were so short. So short. I was about 24 days, 23 days. And I'm usually I'm usually textbook, 28 days, 30 days. And so I go to her and I'm like, everything's really short. I don't know what to do. She says, come to me. This is in October. I go to her. She does her needling. I don't have that experience again. But what I do have is that in October, my cycle goes 24 days, 25, 26, 27, 28. I'm at 32 days. I call her and I say, listen, you either threw me into menopause or I'm pregnant. I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
It's like, this is so weird. Explain that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's crazy, but okay. So I call it like, this is my name for it. I mean, I think people have called it this, but AcuNap. Like when people come in, you put the acupuncture, they have a nap, but it's not a normal nap.
I told
It's
you.
a very
I
strange
told you.
nap.
What did you do?
Remember I did that with Emil?
What?
Remember they did the acupuncture on him and then I fell asleep?
No,
They didn't do it for me. They did it to me also.
You didn't get the needling.
Anyway, keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's this weird place that people go where like all of a sudden they're in dreamland. They're not in a normal, they go through a portal and I feel like you're going into kind of like the control center or the quantum field. This is my philosophy. I'm really into Dr. Joe Dispenza. I don't know if you guys have looked into his work. So what I love about him is he does he bridges spiritual and like woo woo and science because he studies the mind and he does a lot of like he measures his participants, like literally has a whole team of researchers, and it's fascinating the stuff that he's coming up with, like or that they're observing. But they do meditations and they get it. So he talks a lot about the quantum field. So I feel like this is my philosophy, is that the veil between our material world and the quantum world becomes very thin. When you're fully surrendered into the treatments, people will start to get visuals. It's insane. I get all kinds of things.
Yeah.
One of them, she went in after a year of coming to me, had this whole experience, talked to her daughter, knew it was going to be a daughter, got pregnant that after a year, just knew. It was so, it's so bizarre, but it's like this mystery. So that's kind of like, yeah, we can explain it. But then there's this other mystery that I don't think anybody even has words to describe.
Yeah, that was definitely my experience, because the day that I found out I was pregnant, I woke up and I said to him, I had a dream that we're going to have a baby boy. And he said, well, that would be cheaper than the IVF.
I love that. That's so funny. It is so funny. It's
That's
true.
where my mind was at the time.
True.
Yeah, that's what he said. But yeah, I had a dream about my son. I dreamt that he was born and I was holding him, and even at the hospital, or no, actually I dreamt him at another hospital, but it was just so vivid that it was like, where am I exactly? But yeah, that was the day I found out I was pregnant. About 10 hours later was when
really
I found out I
amazing.
was pregnant. Yeah.
Wow. My mom had a dream about me. I'm a product of secondary infertility, and she had a dream about me, and she's like, everybody has straight hair except for me. And so she sees a girl with curly hair, and I used to have really, really curly hair, like locks. And jumping up and down. And she was like, "Who's this girl?" And somebody said, "That's your daughter." And then I think it was a year after she
Wow.
conceived me.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty
Isn't that
crazy.
something?
And I had a dream
Yeah.
also about my daughter. It's like a whole other story. But yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty wild. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. Tell us, tell our audience where we can find out more about you, what you have going on.
Oh, thank you. So
Yeah.
my name is Michelle, MichelleOravitz.com. Basically, it's my name.com is my website. And you can find my Instagram. I have a fertility podcast, which I should actually have you come on and tell your story, because if
Oh,
you're okay with
absolutely.
that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And
What's
so
the name of your podcast?
it's the Wholesome Fertility Podcast.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I also just recently published a book called The Way of Fertility, and it really talks about like ancient wisdom that Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, is based off of, and how our bodies really want to conceive. It's just about getting to that homeostasis, that yin and yang balance, and really like listening to the body's communication and intelligence, which we come from incredible design of intelligence, and our bodies are incredibly intelligent. So how to get back into it, the benefits of meditation and different exercises. So that's pretty much it. You guys can find me in MichelleOravitz.com.
We got it on the banner below. So
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. And we will be in contact so that we can be on your podcast as well.
Yes.
Thank you for inviting us.
Of
thank you very
course.
much.
Yeah.
Good talking to you, Michelle.
Thank you.